First of all, welcome. Many of you have been to our recurring monthly educational series that we do here. One thing I want to make sure I don't forget to say, if you've got questions, there's a Q&A part of the application. It could be hidden for you, but if you go to the bottom right corner and see three dots there, you can click on that. You can kind of add the Q&A panel. If you have any questions at all as we're presenting, feel free to drop it right in there. I'll be looking at those questions. And if I see them soon enough and can incorporate them in live on the fly while Chris is doing his session, we'll do it live then. If not, I might batch it and do them towards the latter part. The other thing to note is that you've been invited to this session for lots of reasons. You've been on a list, you've been to other sessions before, but we're also recording it. So when the session is over, if you'd like to get a copy of it, the recording, a copy of the presentation itself, or even a follow-up with a one-on-one consultation or kind of a lunch and learn with Chris or anyone from the team, we can get that arranged as well. So on that note, again, this is part of an educational series we do every month. It's really focused to how to get more out of ServiceNow. I mean, CDW is one of the top ServiceNow partners in the ecosystem. We've been providing ServiceNow services for more than 10 years, but we've also been a ServiceNow customer for more than 10 years, right? So that importance to kind of drive more out of ServiceNow every day, every month, every quarter, it's not only coming from us as a partner and best practices, we're in the same boat as you guys in many cases. There's so much we want to do with our platform, but understanding the right priority, understanding constantly what comes out in the new platform releases. For example, today's topic, the future of integrated risk management, specifically setting up common controls in ServiceNow. Chris is going to talk about that. Some of this is brand new feature sets that came with Utah. Chris will also share some background about integrated risk management as well. So without further ado, don't forget the Q&A section. Feel free to throw in your questions there. Hey, Chris, I am going to pass the mic over to you in just a sec, but I'll share with the whole team. We are really fortunate to have Chris as part of our ServiceNow team inside of CDW. Chris is a portfolio manager for us, and he brings 20 years of experience really transforming IT. And specifically, right, Chris is focused from a ServiceNow platform perspective on things related to integrated risk management. He does some work around SecOps as well, a host of other areas, but we're excited to have him as point for a session like today. And if you're interested in any kind of assistance or follow-up, good chance Chris would be part of that team chatting with you as a follow-up as well. So Chris, the mic over to you, and I'll man the Q&A section and do a quick wrap up for the team at the end.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar. Wanted to let you know that we're going to be talking about governance, risk compliance, and integrated risk management. Kind of getting started here. I did a little research in the last few days of recent articles and trends of what people are talking about. What are the priorities for this calendar year around GRC, governance, risk, and compliance? An article I found the other day was, where is budget money and spending going in the calendar year of 23 around governance, risk, and compliance? And I found this article from Hyperproof to be pretty interesting. It just came out in June, a couple weeks ago. And the key things I got out of that article when I read through it was, we're going through kind of a rough economic time, but from a survey of over 1,000 professionals, they said that 29% of their budget for IT risk in 2023 is going towards getting new GRC tools in place. Where they have a budget, 69% have had a large increase of 10% up to 50% of their budget increase for this year in the GRC space. And if you're not compliant and you're not focused on compliance, you're exposing yourself to a lot of risk and threat to where you could have a data breach. So what is the price you pay when you have some sort of data breach in a worst case scenario? In the biggest data breaches from 2022, more than 50% of those breaches have cost $1 million and upwards in different costs, penalties, and recovery time. So it can be very expensive to be non-compliant. So I think that's a great thing to understand around governance, risk compliance, or what we're talking about today with GRC and integrated risk. So for our webinar today, I do want to kind of cover in the ServiceNow platform, integrated risk is something ServiceNow has been focusing many years in a row of doing constant upgrades, new features, new functions. And this year in 2023, Utah was the latest platform release for ServiceNow. And there's a lot of new things that are coming out in the integrated risk management or IRM space. And I thought I'd share with you some of the highlights. These aren't all the main features that are out in Utah, but I wanted to list out a lot of the new features that are out this year with Utah. So in the IRM platform itself, under the Common Core, issue management kind of spans policy compliance or risk and audit, all three of those applications. In the past, that issue record would only be directly associated to one control or one risk or one policy. Now they've made it so that you can multi-relate many controls, risks, policies to one related issue and have better control over managing the issue library. In the policy and compliance area, common controls is a really brand new feature, something that a lot of our customers have been asking for and wanting for a very long time, where we've put in all kinds of unique workarounds in this area. But common controls basically give you the ability to set up one or more reliant entities to this kind of super controller common control. And then there's another feature that came out with the workspaces that were unveiled last year called the 360-degree view. And that's kind of a graphical display of what you're looking at. The 360-degree view has been upgraded and changed around a little bit to incorporate those reliant entities tied to the common controls and other features around that. Risk management. If you own enterprise risk license, the advanced risk module has something new that's called the risk appetite. It's a way for business owners to say, hey, for the risks of the organization that I'm most concerned about, I want to set my own threshold, my own tolerance levels, and my own risk appetite for what is responsible of my business unit or my line of business or that area that I'm most concerned about. I want to set specific targets and thresholds against those risks and see them on a heat map. So there's a new tailored risk appetite feature that's pretty cool. And then in the machine learning area of ServiceNow predictive intelligence, I see a lot of movement where different areas of the platform is incorporating more and more predictive intelligence. One new feature came out for predictive intelligence and risk where it'll recommend risk statements to different risks that you're building. So it kind of reminds you, hey, you're talking about this type of risk scenario. By the way, here's some other risks that we'd recommend you spin up against related to that topic of risk that you're building out. And then lastly, vendor risk management also has the latest SIG standard information gathering questionnaire that's produced by a third party that publishes a new version of it every year. ServiceNow keeps up with those updates, and there's a new plugin update around the SIG questionnaires for 2023, the light, the core, and the full SIG questionnaires. Now the 2023 questionnaire in it. ServiceNow will deprecate anything older than 3 years. So anything older than 2019 gets removed in the plugin, and then it keeps the latest 3 years out there. And then the vendor portal, the portal that vendors log into to see things that you're assigning to them, like questionnaires, that got an enhancement update as well. It's a little bit easier for you to configure, put your company logo in there, and it's a little easier on the eyes for the vendor themselves to see what's in the queue for them to work on. So for our webinar today, what I wanted to do was explore one of these features, that common control feature built into policy compliance management. And let's drill into that. And I want to teach you and show you kind of best practice around setting up these unique common controls and how it can improve your life around integrated risk. Now, what I'm going to show you today is on the latest, greatest Utah release. Common controls came out just this year. So if you were going to use this in your integrated risk management of ServiceNow, make sure you're upgraded to Utah. I'm also working in the compliance workspace, which came out last year in the Tokyo release. So if you want to take advantage of that new user interface that I'll be talking and showing a lot, it's the compliance workspace. And if you have a Tokyo release or beyond, you should be able to update your instance to see these new workspaces if you're not using them already. All right. So we're talking about this thing called common controls. What do we mean by that? What is a common control? Google, if you do a definition search on common control in Google, you're going to get a wide variety of answers. So this, in my opinion, is the way I would describe a common control to you. Common controls are designed to support many different information systems. That can be business services, business processes, business applications, or a wide variety of different cybersecurity compliance frameworks like NIST or ISO or other, PCI cybersecurity frameworks very efficiently and effectively. In the past, where you'd be audited on many different areas of cybersecurity or compliance, you would have to set up different control groups for all the things you're being audited on. So the idea behind common controls is I can set up one common control framework that could satisfy many different things. So what are the different things common controls can do? So one, I can do test once, but satisfy many in a single control. So if this one control can speak to other things in the organization, I can implement this control, test it once, and show that it satisfies many different areas. We can define what are called enterprise level controls and say, at the system architecture or security architecture level of our organization, we've set up different macro level security requirements that have kind of an overarching feel to our IT organization. We're going to attest to those features one time at the enterprise level and show that it satisfies all these different systems, applications, or processes that roll up to it. You can take these common controls and link them to what is a new definition in ServiceNow, reliant entities. Think of an entity as something tangible, the what's in my organization that my control or my risk is directly associated to. So reliant entities is something that's saying, hey, this common control is a super control. These are the child records or the reliant entities that rely on this common control or that are being satisfied through different forms of evidence gathering that this common control meets the requirement of. The reliant entities are the child of the common control and speak to these are what's being satisfied by the common control. Where we implement those common controls, we also have a new way to do metrics and reporting to let leadership know, hey, we're setting up these kind of hierarchy of super controls or common controls that are going to provide coverage across different areas of our organization at the compliance level, at the auditing level, at the system or application level. And we have better reports to share with you that we're reducing the number of total controls with these common controls. So this is all very exciting. Again, it's a feature that many customers have brought feedback to ServiceNow on, and ServiceNow has listened to that and said, let's build this out. So pretty cool stuff. I'm really excited to share this with you. Now, this does sound complex, but I want to show you and kind of demystify for you today how easy it is to set these up. So how do common controls work? if you're used to building out controls in integrated risk management and ServiceNow, you know there's kind of a control, and the control is associated to what's called an entity, the thing in your organization, the what that control requirement is directly associated to. The new terminology for any base control that gets spun up in the system today will be referred to going forward as a standard control. So all default controls that you build will originate as a standard control. And that standard control will have one single entity that's directly tied to that control. So with common controls, what you do is you're basically upgrading that control from standard to common. So you're promoting it up almost like a hierarchy. And we're saying that this common control is kind of at a higher level than the standard controls, that it provides more coverage and guidance across many different things. So in this case, that common control, when it's still out there, will still have that main entity tied to it. And ServiceNow is referring to that as a primary entity. Now, with this feature of the common control, what we can do is set up one or many reliant entities as the child underneath the common control, which is governing it, and saying, when we have the primary entity of business services, what business services are being satisfied by this common control? In this case, we have 5 listed here: Workday, Salesforce, PeopleSoft, and so on. So in the past, what you'd have to do to pass an audit is spin up 5 different controls, one for each of those different systems, and say, here's my evidence for each one of those different controls. It's the same requirement, but different pieces of evidence. Now we can roll it all up to one parent hierarchy, common control or super control, and say these reliant entities are satisfied by how we've implemented this common control. And that's what I'm going to show you live in the system today on how to set those up. So I'm going to cover 2 use cases in the demonstration for you today, and I hope they resonate with you. Use case 1 would be, how do I implement one control that is a common control for something like user access least privileges? We have some sort of architecture in place that provides, security around that, and all the critical business services, all of our critical business services roll under that architecture. So I don't want to spin up controls for every single business service that's associated to this requirement. I just want to have one super controller, common control, that satisfies all the critical business services that make up our organization, and we can show that to an auditor. Use case number 2 is a little different. Use case 2 is, hey, I want to implement NIST cybersecurity framework, or NIST CSF, as our overarching super controls that satisfy all these additional things that I'm being audited on for Sarbanes-Oxley, for PCI, for ISO 27001, or others, cybersecurity frameworks. How do I implement one control for NIST that can demonstrate that it satisfies all these other frameworks? Now pause there. I think a question came in.
We do. Yeah. Hey, Chris, I think it's good to do a question in line here. It probably is related more to the slide previous, but
Okay.
Barbass is the primary entity business service consuming the standard business service table from the CMDB. Same with Reliant entity. Are those references to business applications in the CMDB APM?
They can be, so entities can represent anything in the organization that you need to tie directly to a control, to a risk, or as reliant entities. And what we'll show today are business services to this point, to this example, or it could be other things like security compliance frameworks like NIST or ISO, or it could be anything tangible in the organization. So entities can represent anything in your organization that you want to directly associate to a control or to a risk, but in today's topic of common controls, they can be also reliant entities to anything that you want to say is being satisfied by this common control. I hope that answers your question. We'll get into it here. So these two use cases is what we're going to do kind of step by step on how to set up in the Utah release of ServiceNow. All right. So we're going to do these two use cases, and we're going to go into the ServiceNow tool and map out our first use case. So here I am. I'm logged into my ServiceNow console in the traditional ServiceNow console view. What we're going to be doing is navigating over to that new user interface, the new landing page for integrated risk management. And they're referred to as workspaces. So if you'll see at the top of the screen here, the black bar navigation, I'm going to click on workspaces, and we're going to see a variety of different workspaces that are traversing the entire platform. In the IRM universe, you'll see there's a compliance workspace, there's a risk workspace, audit workspace, as well as vendor management workspace. There's also business continuity workspace and many others. So IRM is well represented in the workspace arena. But we're going to start by going over to the compliance workspace. So one thing to note, setting up these common controls, you have to do it from that workspace homepage. So here is the compliance landing page, and we're logged in as Scott Lang from Ant-Man movies. So in the compliance management space, what we want to do is on the left navigation, I want to get to a list of controls and find the controls that I want to build out as common. So we go under the all controls view here. And what I'm going to do is look for the controls that I'm the custodian or the owner of. So under lists here, you'll see the traditional kind of ServiceNow console view, compliance library showing your authority documents and policies, scoping with your entities, policy acknowledgement campaigns, policy exceptions, and so on. You can also build out your own personalized views under My Lists. So under My Lists, I have set up my own view that says, show me anything that's one of my controls. So here are my 3 controls that I am responsible for. And if we look under the entity column, we'll see I've labeled the entity for these as different areas of the NIST cybersecurity framework. And again, entities can represent anything in the organization that you want to directly associate to controls or risks. So in this case, I'm selecting entities and pointing them right to the NIST cybersecurity framework so that I can organize compliance requirements around NIST, compliance percentage on how effective those controls are, and be able to have metrics and reporting roll up, kind of a rolled up average score of how compliant we are in these areas of NIST. So I'm going to select that middle control, PRAC number 4, around access permissions. I'm going to click on that, and we're going to drill into the control requirement for PRAC 4. This is access permissions and authorizations are managed with least privilege. So I want to make this kind of a super control and say there's many different applications or business services that will be satisfied from implementing this one control. I don't want to spin up one separate control for every different business service that I'm being audited against and have to have the same conversation over and over about this same requirement for 20 critical systems. I want to have one parent or common control that does that for me. So we can look here, and at the top of the record here, we see the control number, what state it's in, and you'll see there's a new field here called function, where it says standard control. And again, any controls that you build out going forward will be labeled functionally as a standard control. All controls default as a standard control. So what we want to do is upgrade it. Well, is that a difficult procedure? Not really. Let's take a look how we would do that. On the top right, we have different actions to return this control to draft, retire it, save the update, the 360 view, and then this dot, dot, dot icon on the top right, more actions. So I'm going to click on that dot, 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 and there's an option here to convert to common. So I'm saying I'm going to upgrade this from standard control to common control. So it'll give me a pop-up message saying this control is going to be converted to a common control. It will allow you to add these things called reliant entities. What's going to happen is the number of columns available in this view are going to expand out and add those reliant entities. So I will hit OK here. It gives me a pop-up message saying that we've been successfully converted this standard control into a common control. And if you notice on the different tabs here at the top here, overview details, we now have two new columns for reliant entities and reliant entity types. So we're going to explore how I'm going to add those entities. So I click on the Reliant Entities tab. There's nothing in here for right now, but this is the next step, is what relies on this common control that we're satisfying. So now, of all the entities that we've built out in the scoping area of policy compliance, we can select the ones that are directly associated to this one. So I'm going to click the Add button. What I've done is I search for Workday Enterprise Services entity and related that into our related Reliant Entities tab. When I've done that, it gives me a pop-up message saying that Reliant Entity has been successfully added to this common control. So then I would say, are there any other business services that are associated to this Reliant Entity list? And I'm going to hit that add button and rinse and repeat. And kind of fast forwarding here, we've added 5 different business services: Informatica, PeopleSoft, Payroll, Workday, Salesforce. And you can add as many as you want. And what we're saying is all 5 of these critical business services are all reliant on this parent common control for PRAC4. So now we don't need those controls. If they were out here before for Informatica and PeopleSoft, we can literally retire those controls and say they're no longer relevant. They're being governed by this common control. Now we need to update this common control and add data to it to prove that we're meeting those requirements and satisfying these reliant entities. So one thing we can do here, another kind of feature update, is that 360-degree view. It takes this kind of list view perspective and gives us a second dimension to it. So if we look under more, we'll see that there's different things that I can do to support proving or disproving this control is in place. We can set up things like indicators, control tests, and test plans, evidence requests to gather evidence and centralize it in the one common control. So think of that as kind of a tiered approach of how do we support common controls. One thing I'd recommend to you is any control that you're going to upgrade to common control should have at least one indicator or one control test mapped against it so that you can do ongoing continuous validation of the control and be able to prove that to an R that you have ongoing validation of the control on a scheduled basis. Indicators, control tests are things that you can do to support that. So if we wanted to take a closer look at these things, we click on that 360-degree view, and we can see different things in here. But if we're looking at like the indicators, the indicator result shows us that the last indicator that ran for this has passed. So we're showing that we are running indicators on a scheduled basis and gathering that information to prove the control is compliant. We go to the evidence tab, we can see that there's different pieces of evidence that we've requested from an auditing perspective, or from a continuous monitoring perspective, and we're gathering evidence, assigning it to different people, and they're attaching that in here. So what we're doing is gathering all the information we need to prove to an auditor this common control is satisfying those common reliant entities, and using these sub-processes for attestation, for control tests, for indicators, and for evidence requests, and moving it all into the one single system of record. All right. So we go in that 360-degree view, and this gives us a visual understanding of that control requirement. In the middle, we see control PR AC4. The status is compliant. On the left, it applies to that main entity, the primary entity, and 5 reliant entities. We've also set up one test plan where we can do control testing against it. And under included is anything actionable that we're doing to prove that this control exists and is meeting the requirement. So for this common control, we have done 1 attestation, we have 2 control tests, and 2 pieces of evidence that we've collected against it. We can see that in one visual flow here. When I click on that reliant entities on the applies to area, it'll list out all those different reliant entities. In this case, they're all different business services that are satisfied from this common control. So that's use case number 1. We have many different business services or business processes or applications that we want to roll up to one parent common control so that we can reduce our footprint of all these other reliant systems that are satisfied by one main overarching control. So I'm going to go into use case number 2. I'm going to navigate back to my controls list, and we're going to select the top control for use case number 2. So PR.DS-7 development and testing environments are separated from the production environment. So let's go ahead and drill into that next control. And again, we're using NIST as kind of our superset of controls. So here's our NIST control for PRDS7. Production and development and testing environment is separate from production. So what I want to use for this use case is NIST is our superset of overarching controls that satisfy many different compliance frameworks like PCI, SOX, or other areas that we're being audited against. They all have very similar requirements to this one. In the past, I'd have to implement all those different frameworks and have 5 different conversations with 5 different auditors on the same requirement repeated over and over. And where I asked teams in IT to support that, I'm pinging them 5 different times for the same requirement. Why not just do it once, attach it to one common control, and be done with it? And then have a conversation with each of those separate auditors. NIST is our overarching control. And by the way, it's going to satisfy PCI or all these other frameworks. So let's map that out. So same conversation, we're going to take this standard control under the function standard control. We're going to hit that ... more actions, and I'm going to convert it to common. Pretty simple procedure. It's going to tell me we're going to be able to add those reliant entities. Great. We'll hit OK. We now have those tabs lit up for reliant entities, reliant entity types. Use case 1, I went to the reliant entities tab and hand selected each business service that were critical that supported that common control. Could I do that in a wider approach? So the answer is yes, reliant entity types. So I'm going to go to the reliant entity types tab and say there's multiple entities that are rolled under one entity type. Think of an entity type as a grouping of one or many entities that are similar to that topic that we're describing here of that entity type. So in this case, I created an entity type that specifically called out the requirements for NIST PRDS7 and said, here's other control objectives in our organization that are from other cybersecurity frameworks that represent these entities. So I'm going to hit add, and it gives me a pop-up window. The first item on this entity types list says NIST PRDS7 common control related control objectives. So in other words, are there other control objectives outside of NIST, like PCI or others, that directly satisfy PRDS7 from NIST? So I'm going to hit add. When I hit add, it says entities are being added. Now, if you notice, the Reliant Entities tab has nothing in it right now. What it's going to do is it's going to grab the entities found under that entity type that we've just related. So when I hit save here, it's going to refresh and update the Reliant Entities list. So on the Reliant Entities list, now we have 5 Reliant entities, and take a look. And actually, this list view kind of truncates the full list of them here. So we're going to look at it a little bit differently, but we'll see some other cybersecurity frameworks outside of NIST that are now listed. ISO 27001, COBIT, CIS, and sneaking kind of on the bottom there is PCI. So I think this is a common requirement for anyone that's dialed in here that is playing around in our IRM universe. I bet you're going, this is exactly what we need. So the good news is it's very possible to set this up. So let's click on that 360-degree view, and we'll see PRDS7 is our NIST common control. If I click on Reliant Entities, it lists out the ones that I set up for this demo. ISO 27001, requirement A.12.1.4, also speaks to separating the design and development environment from production. PCI DSS, this is the older version, 6.41, also has the same requirement. CIS, the SANS CIS top 20 or top 18, depending on which version you're playing around with. The version 8 is Control 16.8. The older version of CIS from version 7.1 is CIS Control 18.9. And then control objectives for IT for good measure, A.1.3.4 also has all the exact same requirements that the NIST one does. So we're saying NIST control that we've implemented for PRDS7 satisfies ISO, PCI, CIS, COBIT, use your imagination, Sarbanes-Oxley, HIPAA, HITRUST, GDPR, which other ones tie directly associated together. So you can make them all Reliant entities and link them to your common control. Pretty cool stuff, huh? Waiting a long time for this feature. All right, so now we need to make that common control do its job. We need to be able to prove to an auditor that we've done our due diligence, that this overarching common control has all the artifacts in it. We need to prove that it's fully compliant and meets all these requirements. So under included, we want to include all these sub-processes for attestation, for control testing, for indicators that prove we're doing all the homework around this. So we go back to our control and we drill into the indicator that's related to this control. And we see that this control indicator frequency runs quarterly. And the next time it's going to run is September 30th. The last time it ran, it passed. So what we're doing is quarterly validation that this NIST control is doing what we expect it to. We have an indicator at the control level for NIST that says go review on a quarterly basis that we're doing our due diligence around this control and give us a pass or fail condition that we can share to an auditor that, hey, every quarter we're doing continuous validation of this common control. Another, where we listed out all the features that are new to the Utah release, that 360-degree view, I think previously would give just kind of one view. Now you can change the perspective of that, where we're at the indicator sub-process level, we can click on the 360-degree view of this indicator and see a graphical view. In the middle, it's talking about the indicator template that it came from. And on the left, it applies to a specific control and one primary entity. And then under included shows these indicator results. This is, to me, something that you can put up in front of an auditor and say, you know, a year ago, we implemented this common control. We're doing quarterly validation. Under this indicator results, we should show 4 indicator results from the previous 12 months, one for each quarter that it ran, and give me 4 values of pass or fail, that every quarter we're doing this validation and every quarter it passes. And now this 360-degree view, you can drill into the indicator and show that and have the conversation with the auditor and give them something visual to look at that you can start drilling into the details of it. So pretty cool stuff, in my opinion. All right. So kind of last thing I want to mention to you is where you want people to participate in the process of integrated risk. I know there's a lot of different processes, a lot of sub processes that people have to learn and get used to. In the old, integrated risk, you'd have to go on the console and look on the navigator to see a list view of my controls, my attestations, my issues, my indicator tasks, all the different actionable things that you're asking me to participate in. I have to know where to look in the ServiceNow console and find the specific hyperlink that's going to take me to different things that I'm being asked to do. This compliance workspace was designed to improve the end user experience so that when you're asking folks to participate, control owners, business owners, to participate in the IRM process, where can we give them that one-stop shop to see anything that we're asking their help with? So the compliance workspace on the right side, there's a section called tasks. My pending tasks is at the top. Below that is a box for my group's tasks. So depending on how you're delegating these work assignments that are actionable things to do a control attestation, a control test, an indicator, whatever you need their assistance with, you can now explain to all the participants, go under my pending tasks to see anything on the radar that we've assigned to you. Or if you're a manager of people and we're delegating work assignments out to your team and all the members of your team, as the manager, how can I see what's being delegated to my entire group? So you can go under my group's task and see what's being delegated to the team level or the folks on that team. So from there, we can click on, oh, I have 4 open pending tasks. And by the way, 2 of them are overdue. So we are trying to make anything actionable, have some sort of deadline or due date or priority tied to some sort of SLA or goal to resolve it in a timely manner. But we'll click on those 4 open tasks, and we can see in the IRM universe for policy and compliance, I've been asked to do 2 control attestations. I have 1 engagement where I'm probably doing a control test, and I have 1 evidence request that's pending of me. And I can see under evidence requests that I have to run a report and attach it. So it's easier now in the compliance workspace than it's ever been before to get the help of all the people in the organization you need to get actionable work done around the things that you're asking them to do around controls, validation of controls, testing of controls, issues where controls become non-compliant. We need you to follow up on that. Acknowledge reading a policy. Anything that's in the IRM universe will show up under my pending tasks or my group's tasks. So anything that we need people to help with is all in one single place. If there are issues and we need to see those, we can click on issues and see those as well. Under the list view here, I can create my own set of lists that are specific to me. So you have enormous flexibility to build out a list view of anything that you want to see that just is important to you. In this case, under my lists, I built out my controls. I built out all common controls or NIST common controls. So where we just went through those two examples in the last few minutes, I now have a list view that can look at all of our overarching super controls for NIST and those common controls and be able to organize them, list them out, report on them, and attend to them much faster than using the traditional ServiceNow console view. So where I'm trying to pitch for you is if you have IRM and you're not using the compliance workspace or the risk or audit workspace, I'd highly recommend you start playing around with them and start using them. They're very, very useful. If you're the program manager overseeing the whole practice of IRM, these workspaces also have good trending data where we can see the whole universe of what's happening. And think of around control assurance, there's kind of three lines of support I like to describe, kind of three levels of support. Level one is being able to perform attestations against controls. Level two support is doing ongoing schedule validation of control through these indicators, whether they're manual or potentially automated. And then the third level is around control testing, where we're doing deep dive audit examination of how the control was designed against how it performs in operation. So those are the three levels of support around controls, and the program manager can see anything actionable in the control universe that's on the radar. Obviously, my demo system has hundreds and hundreds of these things because all I do is demo every week. So we can see ongoing control tests, open indicators, active attestations. How many have failed in the last 6 months? It gives us a hard number and a trending number to show whether we're trending up or down in the number of control failures or indicator failures in the last few months. So the new face of these indicator or these workspaces is dashboards that show trending data of anything that's actionable that we're assigning someone to go do homework on. So if you're the program manager and want to see holistically everything that's going on, the workspaces for compliance, risk, and audit give you more enriched data around that. And then we can also go on the left under issues and see a dashboard for any issues in the system that are in flight. On the right, again, my issues, where I'm owning an issue and I'm responsible for it, or if I'm being asked to do a peer review of an issue, or I have a remediation task assigned to me that's underneath the issue, I can see it under my issues here. So good stuff here. So that is kind of everything I wanted to spend time with and show you today around the new Utah release of ServiceNow, featuring the common controls and playing around in these brand new compliance workspace user interface. So hope you got a lot out of it. Would love to have more conversations if you are interested. I'm happy to spend time with anyone or if there's any other questions.
Hey, thanks so much, Chris. And yeah, let's tie it together, right? You've got a few more notes here that talk about and helping clients that are on the call today maybe get started, right, on their own, right, and maybe advance where they already are. So some preparation advice here, and then ultimately implementation advice. But I think the takeaway here is if you don't have the resources in-house, if you're looking just to get some guidance or kind of pick our brain, Chris, the team would love to get some time on the calendar, lunch and learn, whatever you guys want to do to continue this dialogue. But if you actually are looking for help and want to have a partner like CDW come in and help get some of these controls implemented or really any part of your ServiceNow platform, we would love to be part of it. So as far as next steps, first of all, thanks for joining. And if you'd like us to repeat this session for a team at your organization, tailor it a bit, we can do that as well. If you want to, talk about how we can help you, we'll get that meeting set up as well. At the end of the day, if you just have feedback, how was the session? What other topics would you like to see us cover the balance of this year as we put together the rest of our kind of free educational workshops here at CDW? We'd love to hear from you. So again, thanks everybody for coming. And again, look forward to providing any help we can at any level on this topic or others. Talk to you all very soon.